Reddit. What is the most unexplained thing that has ever happened to you? Serious. Edit. Wow. First time on the front page. I survived a car crash as an infant after being ejected 100 plus feet from the car. Without so much as a scratch. I was still in my car seat when the police found me. My dad wasn't so lucky and he broke his neck. He was in a halo for quite a while. The driver that hit us was driving stealth. No headlights on at night. And was absolutely hammered. When I was 14, my dad and I were home alone as my mom and brothers went to visit the grandparents. One morning I woke up and got ready to go round a friend's house. Dad said he wasn't feeling too great and that he was going to have a lie down. Didn't think anything of it and went to my friend's house. On the way there I had this feeling of dread and fear that I couldn't quite pin down, so I phoned my mom and told her that Dad and I were all right. But he felt ill. Nothing unusual at all. Dad was ill quite a lot with headaches and whatnot. When I actually got to my friend's house, I was there no longer than 5 minutes when the feeling of dread got overwhelming. I felt like the world was closing in on me and that I was about to die. Fear welled up in me and it was impossible to ignore it. I left and walked home. Not ran. I don't know why. The whole way back knowing. Not thinking. I knew it as if it had already happened. That I was going to find something at home that I didn't want to. I've also just realized typing this that I didn't phone my dad as I walked home. I think I wanted to stave off what I was going to discover as long as possible. I got to the corner near to my house and freeze. A big hedge separates my house from the path and I didn't want to go around. Because I knew what was on the other side. I could see it in my mind. A few minutes go past and I eventually manage the few steps around the hedge and my heart drops. An ambulance is sitting on my drive. The fear and dread disappeared instantly and everything just seemed to become calm. I walked past the ambulance. Still don't understand why I didn't look in it first. And into the house. The living room is a mess. My dad's computer chair is on its side and everything on his desk is scattered onto the floor. I calmly walk through each room in the house. But no one's in any of them. So back out to the ambulance. I knock on the doors and the wait seems like an eternity. I didn't want them to open. Once they're opened, it's over. But they do and there's my dad. Alive. Sitting up on the bed grinning with the paramedics. I can remember saying, "That's my father," and then getting into the ambulance. I was angry, confused and relieved all at the same time. For the last half an hour my mind had convinced me that I was going to find something life-changing at home. But here he was perfectly. At the time. Alright, when I'd left for my friend's house my dad had went on to his computer and suddenly thought that he was having a heart attack. He phoned 999 and tried to describe what was happening. But he passed out and the next thing he remembers is the paramedics scooping him off the floor and taking him into the ambulance. Turns out his aorta was slowly but surely tearing away from his heart and he was rushed into surgery. They chucked an artificial valve in him and 10 years later he's fit as a fiddle. I'll never be able to explain what I felt and why I'd drawn back home. I don't believe in anything supernatural or spiritual, so coincidence, I guess? A bloody, weird coincidence. I had a girlfriend once who, whilst discussing this exact topic, admitted in a very embarrassed tone that she thought her previous house was haunted. All the usual stuff. Closed latched doors opening on their own. Footsteps and no one there. Until one day she woke up to get a drink at night and saw an apparition of man in his late 40s. Well dressed, standing at the top of the stairs. She blinked a few times to make sure she wasn't imagining shadows in the dark. But he was there, looking down the stairs. He turned and walked away. She grabbed a bat and ran upstairs afterwards, but he was gone. Creepy enough, right? But easy enough to disregard and nod and smile politely with the disclaimer that the universe is full of unexplained shit and anything's possible. Etc. etc. A year later we're at this party and meet a random guy who it turns out lived in the same suburb as that. Turned out to be the same street. Turned out to be the same house. Guy kind of looks around awkwardly and says, "I don't want to sound weird or anything, but did you see the ghost at the top of the stairs?" We had never met this guy and had no common friends. And I was the only person she'd ever told about it. Freaked me the fuck out. My story is from my first tour in Iraq. We were stationed not far from Baghdad at the time. Our sector had had some heavy activity a couple months earlier and as a result there was a 2,200 closing of checkpoints set at most crossroads in the area. No in, no out. This was followed at 2,400 by a strict off-street curfew. On this night we were lucky enough to have patrol duty instead of manning one of those points. At about 2,230 we have pulled to the side of the road to mount over watch for a while. When a minivan slowly pulls up. An honest-to-God Astro van-style minivan. Iraq has vans. Vans of many makes and types. However, Iraq does not have soccer mom mobiles. Weird but not too weird. Still cautious. Could be anything. Probably just a local trapped on the wrong side of the CP trying to beg through. However, next comes the driver. I move forward to try and puzzle out what he wants. The driver asks in flawless American accented English, "Hey, are the roads closed ahead?" Quote. I had expected broken English begging me to help him through the very closed checkpoint ahead. The best I could stammer was something like, "Yeah," as eloquently as possible. His response, again in a perfect American accent. "Well, dang. Oh well, you have a good night now. Catch you later, buddy." I'm paraphrasing him, but I distinctly remember him calling me buddy as he drove off. I remember because as I wondered about his car and the conversation, I saw his license plate. It was from Florida. To this day I don't know who that stranger was, but I wonder if he wasn't just some guy who got really lost and refused to ask for directions. Good luck to you, traveler. I hope you finally found your way home. Edit. Spelling. I just posted this the other day, but I don't mind sharing it again. When my sister and I were kids, we were out front of our home, playing near the mailbox. Mom and Dad were there by the window watching, and according to them, my mother turned to my father and asked him to bring us inside. He shrugged her off, but she became more urgent. He asked why it was a problem, and she suddenly panicked and started heading towards the front door despite being less than a week away from giving birth to our youngest sister. He stopped her and stepped outside to call us in, and we complied. Less than a minute later, a car came barreling down the street at high speed and struck our mailbox, destroying it. We would have both been killed instantly. My parents have never felt entirely comfortable talking about it. We have had strange stuff happen around the house that is hard to explain. My wife thinks we have a ghost. I can usually rationalize what happened, except for the pizza box incident. We had ordered pizza. After eating it, we put the empty box in the trash can, turned 90, and went to bed. I wake up in the middle of the night to a flash of light that had lit up the whole house. Kinda like lightning with and thunder. Try to go back to bed. Hear a strange either walking or knocking type sound. I get up and go into the kitchen. The pizza box is in the middle of the kitchen floor about 10 feet away from the trash can. I stood there for 3 minutes, never had a logical explanation. Once when I was 5 I answered the door and 2 slightly older children waltzed into my house like it was theirs and I was their butler. I ran and got my dad and he handled it. Right. Well, I doubt this will get seen, but all the comments here are all creepy. So I'll share a somewhat nice one. When I was very young I had violent diarrhea and vomiting for a couple of days. My mom took me to my grandmother, who was a nurse. She took one look at me and rushed me to the hospital. I was so dehydrated that I couldn't even drink on my own. I came very close to death at one point, but I recovered eventually. A couple of weeks later, my mom and grandmother were talking about my stay at hospital. My mom said something along the lines of how the doctors brought me back, when I apparently piped up and corrected her. No, it was Granddad. He pulled me out of the hole. My grandfather had passed a few years earlier. My mother said my grandmother just closed her eyes and smiled. I can't remember any of it since I was so young, but I still think about it every now and again. My grandmother saved my life. I'm glad I was able to somewhat repay her by making her happy that day. She passed a few years later. I'd like to think she and my grandfather are together and happy. Cheers, Nanny and Granddad. I was having a dream. I was in my bed and a brown fish was flying around the room. It then flew into my face and I woke up like I had been hit in the face and feel slimy. I look at the ground and spot something foreign. Get up. Turn on lights. A dead small fish on the ground. I was alone. No one believes me. I have a witness for this event, and he doesn't have a way to explain it either. I was sitting in my room at my computer talking to my roommate, who was standing next to me. My computer was right beside the door to my room. At the time, I was idly flipping a quarter about in my fingers. When I dropped it, both of us saw it fall, saw it hit the floor and heard it bounce. It went about a half a foot back into the air, and then vanished. Both of us saw it disappear. We searched everywhere for it. We never found it. We even made a point of looking for it when I moved out, searching the area and anywhere it could have bounced to. Never found it. Ever. The weirdest and most unexplainable thing happened to my youngest sister when she was probably 2 to 3 years old. My Uncle Ben had passed away and we were at his funeral. After the funeral we had a gathering for friends and family at a friendship center. Basically a hall-type building. After a while someone noticed that my youngest sister was missing. So we're searching this building frantically for probably 20 minutes. Someone eventually starts checking the rooms in the area as well. I remember someone said they heard some laughing coming from one of the rooms, but the door was locked. So we searched for a key but couldn't find one and eventually just took the door off. When we opened the door she was alone and perfectly fine. When we asked her what was doing she said Uncle Ben wanted to play and she followed him into the room. Probably one of the only unexplainable things to happen to me, but at least it was a good one in a way. Used to rent a large house with 2 friends and often heard footsteps upstairs when we were all downstairs or any one of us were alone. Just put that down to it being a large old house. Also found that objects from the basement, which was full of crap, would occasionally appear around the house. But because we always had friends hanging around in the house, just figured it was one of them. But one night, around 2 a.m., we were all awoken by a loud smash. All came out our rooms and the lad who had the room furthest down the corridor was saying the mirror on the wall had smashed. He seemed really freaked out, but me and the other lad didn't see what was so scary about a mirror falling off the wall. Probably a loose nail. But then he explained the mirror frame was still on the wall, but the glass within it had just exploded. I went to go help my uncle clean out his cousin's house after one of them passed away. They were hoarders, so they kept everything under the sun, including bags of trash. Well, after a few hours and barely making a dent, I went upstairs to go take a leak. After I was done, I wash my hands and go to use the towel which hung under a wall-length mirror. I look in the mirror and I see a guy. Maybe 40s behind me. Apron on, blood on it. Handlebar mustache. Epic. Hair parted down the middle. I mean to a T, I remember him today. I turned. He's gone. I haul ass downstairs, tell my mom, she laughs it off like I'm some sort of ghost whisperer. We go into the basement to start there. Full on butcher station and aprons hanging from apparently the guy who built the place in the 1900s. When my throat randomly closed up one day following the sensation of an ice-cold hand tightening around my neck. I have no allergies. I don't suffer from anxiety or panic attacks. It's never happened before or since. I don't really believe in paranormal stuff, but I have no explanation other than a ghost strangled me. I've posted this story to Reddit several times in the hopes that someone can explain it. So I work at a sandwich shop. Anyway, I was getting ready to close at 10 p.m. and I'm pretty meticulous about closing on time because I'm usually ready to go home by then. Anyway, it's 9:55 p.m. and the bell rings, letting me know someone came in. I grumble a little because I'm tired and head to the front. This little boy, probably 7 or 8, is standing in front of the counter. He's wearing this old-fashioned tweed jacket and a red baseball cap. I say, "Hello, what can I do for you tonight?" Like I usually do. He just stares at me like I grew a second head. I stare back, confused. "I have to use the restroom," he says and runs back to where the restrooms are. I hear the door squeal open and slam shut. At this point I'm a little aggravated because I'm getting ready to close and I don't want to have to wait on this little brat whose parents couldn't even be bothered to come in with him. So I start to close. I turn off the open sign and head to the back to do some quick dishes, thinking I'll just lock the door behind the little boy when he leaves. I finish the dishes and start to put the food in the refrigerator. I'm starting to get pissed. All I have to do is put the food away, count the bread, and count the drawer. I finish all of this and still no little boy. I put on my coat and get ready to leave, gathering receipts and such. I go to knock on the door of the boys' restroom. "Hey, I'm closing. You need to leave." "Nothing." "Hey, kid, come on." Still nothing. "If you don't at least answer me, I'm going to open the door." The lock was broken, so I knew I would be able to open it. I stood there, worrying that maybe something happened to him. "Kid?" I jiggle the handle until it opens. I kind of cover my eyes, because I didn't really want to see a little boy on the toilet. I expected him to scream or at the very least something. When all there was silence. I looked into the restroom, the size of a small closet. There was no one, no sign of anything. The lid was still lifted from when I had cleaned it earlier. No trash in the bin. What? I checked the girls' restroom and the entire lobby. Nothing. Nowhere in the entire shop. And there is absolutely no way that he left. It's impossible that he left because I've worked there long enough that the doorbell is a Pavlovian response, and you can hear it clearly everywhere in the store. I went into work a little early the next morning and get my check. My close friend was there and she and I talked for a little about her boyfriend and gossip that she had and whatever. Then she says, "Dude, there was the creepiest little kid standing outside the front door this morning when I came in. We come in and leave from the back door." "Really?" "Yeah. He was just standing there staring in the window. But when I went to open the door, he ran off." "What did he look like?" I ask, trying to keep from freaking out. "Boy, gray coat and red hat. Neither I nor anyone has seen or heard about him since." "What the fuck?" TL. Doctor. Little kid shows up in at my work, uses restrooms, and apparently disappears. Then my coworker sees him outside the next morning. Also, sorry for the amount of text. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was sitting in my car at a red light. It was about 8 p.m. and dark out. I was completely sober and well rested. Suddenly my car was in the middle of the intersection and people were honking at me. It was a slight incline, and I drive a standard, so if I were to space out and have my car roll, it would have rolled backward, not forward. The strangest part was the car was still out of gear. Once my ex-girlfriend woke me up frantically because my arm was waving back and forth on its own. Confused and half asleep, I tried to grab my arm to get it to stop, and I shit you not, the chair next to my bed flung across the room. I have no idea if a word exists for the expression my ex had on her face, but it was one of terror. We walked downstairs, made food, and she told me how I was talking in my sleep and my arm just went nuts. We didn't sleep in my house much after that. Copied from one of my older comments. When I was a kid, I suffered from asthma bad. I mean almost died several times bad. Had to go to the hospital almost weekly bad. It was on one such fateful night. I saw something. I have never claimed it to be 100% true, as I was still lightheaded from the asthma attack earlier. But I know it wasn't a dream. I remember it vividly because my parents were already divorced and hated each other. So him being there meant it was bad. Driving us home, I looked out of the driver's side rear seat and looked down. There I saw a dog, human, thing. It was the size of an average coyote, with hind legs like one, but its front legs were that of a human's, but with animal paws. It was covered in silverish gray hair, and its skin way dark and rough looking. As I sat up more to get a better look, it turns to look at me. Its eyes were pale white and empty looking. This thing was fast. It was keeping up with the car. After all, as we continued down the road, I never felt scared or anything. Just at peace. Like it wasn't going to hurt me. Just protect me. Anyway, we turned onto our road and it stopped. I looked out the back windshield. And it just sat there. And disappeared. From that day on, my asthma got less and less severe. I asked my father, who is half Native American, and he told me it might have been a spirit that was watching out for me. I'm not religious anymore, but I'll be damned if I don't have a healthy level of respect for Native American customs, spirits nowadays. Not sure if that was what you were asking. But hopefully you enjoyed my encounter. Edit. Stupid phone edit. Jesus. I just saw a post on r Skinwalkers that mentioned a guy being attacked by one near featuring Campbell, Tennessee. That's very near to where I was when I saw this thing. His story is very different than mine, but the close proximity makes me wonder. I awoke alone in my bed at 1 a.m. My girlfriend was not in bed with me as usual. In a kind of stupor, I got dressed and got in my car. I drove to another city across the local river. I drove up and down a few streets until I saw a van that met a description I'd heard somewhere but couldn't be sure. I got out and walked up a flight of external stairs on the house by the van. I looked in a small window only to see my girlfriend being fucked on the bathroom floor by some guy she worked with. I kicked in the screen door and started screaming. My GF and her lover appeared quickly. She was crying. They were both shocked. I'd never been to that part of the city before and I had no idea where her lover lived. I'd only met him once before at a party. I had no idea they were having an affair. I used to listen to Sigur Rós every night while falling asleep. I was always into the paranormal and I still am. I've always had suspicions that there was something in my parents' house. Well, one night I was laying in bed just about to go to sleep. All of a sudden I felt something walk into my room. It's kind of hard to explain. I just felt a presence in the room. I opened my eye, and of course I saw nothing out of the ordinary. I then thought to myself, I should try to talk out loud. I've seen this on stupid paranormal shows and stuff. So I whispered something along the lines of, if there is someone in my room, give me a sign. All of a sudden my CD stopped playing and it was just static. It sounded like a crappy AM radio station. My CD player had a built-in radio, so I'm not sure if that got switched on or what. At this point in time I was petrified. All I could think is, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that. Quote, well, the static continues to play for 5 to 10 seconds. I then say out loud, stop, with a little firmness behind it. But still a whisper. Right as I said, stop, the static stopped and my CD continued playing without a problem. I used that radio per Candela player for 4 years before that and I still use it to this day. And nothing like that has ever happened to me before or anything like that after. It still sends shivers down my spine thinking about that. I got hit by a car pretty much head on. Well, as close to head on as can be. My little brother and sister were there and they'll pretty much tell you I pulled a shadow cat. Or maybe a flubber. The car kind of went through me. I wasn't paying attention, so I guess my body was totally limber or something because I didn't even get hurt. Didn't fall over either. To give you an idea of the speed the car was traveling. The person hit the brakes immediately and stopped about 50 feet beyond the point of impact. They saw that I was okay and sped away. Doubtlessly bewildered. I am an X-man. I was in college on a road trip with my 2 best friends. We stopped at a fast food place to eat lunch. After I place my order, I'm standing back waiting for them to call my number and I get this really weird feeling. Like, I'm not safe. And it's coming from the worker across the counter. I'm just absolutely petrified by this dude. Paralyzed. Then, all of a sudden as I'm looking at him he gets this crazy black aura all around him. The best way I can describe it is that he had a cloud of black smoke all around him. Time stops, and I look over at my 2 best friends. They're paralyzed as well. I said to them, something is wrong here. There is something wrong with this man. Something is effed up. They just shake their head yes. We talked about it in the car. Got the food to go at that point. And agreed that we all saw the same thing. And had the fearful feeling before it happened. We've never spoken about it again. A few weeks after my grandfather passed away, I was finishing up my spring break and my mom's side of the family all came up to my college's town to see me off. We made a day of it and went shopping and out to eat before they all dropped me off at my dorm. They helped me carry my bags inside and we were all standing around my tiny dorm, talking before they were about to leave when suddenly my mom's phone started ringing. She was being called by the phone at my grandmother's house. But there was nobody at my grandmother's house. In fact, my grandmother was in the room with us. My mom answered the phone and said, hello? But there was just silence on the other end before the phone at my grandmother's house hung up. To this day, we still don't know how the phone at my grandmother's managed to mysteriously call my mom's phone. When there was nobody at the house to use it, everyone who had a key to the house was in the room. When my grandfather was getting very sickly towards the end of his life, he often was unable to come on family outings like this one and was confined to the house. My mom likes to think that maybe his spirit was lonely because everyone was gone and he wanted to hear her voice. I was walking to my car after my shift at 3:30 am and I was very tired and backed up and I hear a loud pop. I get out and a basketball was put behind my wheel and out of nowhere 3 guys run up to me dressed in ski masks and suits. They throw a bag over my head and throw me in the trunk and start driving. After a half hour of sheer paranoia and thinking I am gonna die, I wake up down the block from my house and I see the three guys get in a black SUV and drive off. I was so relieved not to be dead and I assumed that it was a bachelor party prank gone wrong. Best answer from you, Musical Moses. 10 years ago I was returning home from a road trip with two friends. I received a phone call from my parents asking when we would be arriving. And I explained that we were about 25 minutes away. About a minute later we came around a bend. It was a full moon and we could see the reflection from a lake below us, and other than that the road was completely empty. Suddenly everything went completely dark in the car. No lights from the dash or gauges or headlights on the road. The music also stopped and restarted at the beginning of the CD we were listening to. There was now a vehicle pulled over by the police about 1/4 mile in front of us that hadn't been there a spilt second before. I assumed I had dozed off for just a second as it was late. I thought it was still quite peculiar, though. After about a minute, the driver of the car tuned the music all the way down and said, "Did that just happen to anyone else?" The other passenger in the back seat sat forward abruptly and exclaimed, "I thought I just fell asleep." We then realized that the clock in the car was reading an hour later than it just had a minute before. To keep ourselves from freaking out, we decided that the car had possibly had a momentary electrical failure and reset the clock to an odd time, turned off the dash lights, headlights, and gauges, and restarted the CD player. But when we arrived home 25 minutes later, we were 1 hour late. I am missing an hour of my life, and to this day have no idea how it happened. When I was going through puberty, I used to change the color of my sheets and clothing. For example, I had purple check Laura Ashley sheets, and I turned them green. There would be an outline of my body in green on the purple sheets. The doctor said it was BC. I have a high body temperature, but they were never officially sure. One day when I was younger, my sister asked me why I was mad the day before. I told her I don't know what she is talking about, and she said that apparently in the middle of the night I came downstairs and stared at her. She said that I had bloodshot red eyes, and that I was yelling at her to go away. I didn't believe her until she pulled out her talkboy, remember those, and played back my yelling. To this day I have no memory of the incident at all, but was really creeped out. Okay, so technically, it wasn't me but a buddy of mine. It begins with him getting into the worst car accident our town had seen in a few years. He was late for work, and driving a little too fast on a cold and icy road. He ends up losing control, and spinning. First, he does a 180. Then the front of the car begins to swing back around. Not a 360, but back the way it first spun. While this is happening, the front of the car swings into oncoming traffic, where a hydro truck is approaching. They collide. The truck plows through the car right at the passenger side front quarter panel. It was such a massive collision that the front of the car, including the entire engine and dashboard, were sheared off. Debris everywhere. The CD player was never found. He told me that when it was all over, his feet were on the pavement in front of him, as if there were supposed to be pedals there. He and the truck driver walk away without a scratch. Here is where it gets crazy. My friend had gotten a gift from his grandparents, a small cross necklace, several years prior to this happening, which he had lost shortly after getting it. Don't know how or where it was lost, but it was gone. When the dust had settled at the accident, he opened his hands to find that he was clutching the necklace he had lost over a year before. Removed.